was 18, I rode a motorcycle around Australia. And that was something I always wanted to do. But on that trip, I never made it to Ayers Rock. I thought, well, it's a long way to come into the centre, and it was a few days, and I didn't want to do it at that time. I always regretted it. So later in life, when I was 40, I decided I wanted to travel from Perth to Ayers Rock. And I wanted it to be an adventure, and I wanted it to push me. I've just had a fire down underneath the steering wheel. Flies, holy moly, where do they come from? And I've stopped the car and now it won't start. My life at that time wasn't going so well. My marriage had broken up 2 years previously, and I didn't have custody of my kids. I was missing them, and I had to leave my teaching job because my depression was, it was as bad as it had ever been, and I was just dismantling motorcycles in a wreckers. So I bought a van, a white Mazda van, cost me $500. It ran, it was fairly reliable, and I thought, yep, I'm gonna get to Ayers Rock in this van. And so I packed up, I made a little bed to go in the back of the van, packed water, packed a few food supplies, basically got everything I needed. And, one day I just hit the road. There's not, huge amounts of travel where there's no life or there's no people, but, there's still the real opportunity to break down out in the middle of nowhere and, what am I going to do? So I headed out from Perth. I thought I'm going to go straight to Kalgoorlie. On my way to Kalgoorlie, the van started overheating. And it was spitting water coolant out of the overflow bottle, so I just kept topping it up as I was going along. When I got to Kalgoorlie, I realised there's something not right with the cooling system in the van, so I went into a super cheap auto store and I bought a can of Stop Leak. It says this will stop your radiator leaking, and I tipped it in the radiator, and off I went. Kept spitting coolant out, so I had to just keep stopping regularly and topping up the coolant. What I found, because the radiator goes into an overflow bottle, so I'd drive for about an hour, and then I'd get the overflow bottle and I'd tip the water from the overflow bottle back into the radiator. So I wasn't actually losing coolant on the road, it was just spitting it into the overflow bottle. I was tipping it back into the radiator, and well, why not? It seemed to work, so I just kept going. When I hit the Nullarbor Plain, and the temperature of the van kept coming up, so I decided to drive at 80 kilometres an hour to see if that would keep the temperature down, and it did. The temperature of the van stayed at a reasonable temperature, and I just kept going. But about an hour into the Nullarbor Plain, the temperature gauge just went up, hit H. I thought, all right. So I pulled over, and I should have known better, but I just turned the engine off, and suddenly there's a poof and a psh, and there's steam coming up from under the seat. Because in a van, the engine sits under the front seat. So I pulled over, and I thought, you know what? I didn't bring any tools with me, which I probably should have, but the idea was if I need to dump the van, then I'll leave the van and I'll just take everything in my backpack and I'll find my way home. So I pulled over and I see one of the radiator hoses had busted. Had a look around to see if I could find a screwdriver. Now what I found in the glove box was a multi-tool that my kids had bought me for Father's Day, little one with a hammer and a pair of pliers. So I managed to find a screwdriver, and I got in, I undid the hose, and I cleaned it up, and I pushed it back on, I put the clamp around it, filled up the radiator with all the bottles of water that I had, and I thought, you know what, I'll just make it to the next town. So I've busted a radiator hose, fucking lost all my coolant. So I managed to cut the pipe a bit shorter, push it on, and screw it up with a screwdriver. Still leaking though. So I've chucked in some stop leak, patched it up. I'm just going to keep on going. Getting weary. Seems to spend a whole trip looking at that temperature gauge trying to get it to stay down. Don't know, miles out of anywhere. I'll just keep going. I don't know. Am I going to make it? I don't know. I'll just keep going. So I got up, I got going, and made it to the next town. And the relief when I got there, I was just like, it was amazing. I was this whole sense of euphoria when I got there, and I just wanted to tell someone, you know, look, I broke down, but I fixed myself up and I kept going. But you know, no one's really interested. Everyone's going on about their own lives. So I thought, you know, well, the van got me this far. Let's see if I can baby it. You know, get it to the next town, see how far I go. So I kept an eye on the coolant, kept the speed at under 80 kilometres an hour, and just kept going. So I'm not doing too bad. I've had to rig up the seat. So that I can get enough airflow over the engine, otherwise it overheats. But I'm keeping the temperature down and I have to stay under 80, otherwise I'm stuffed. Oh, the box is there because the hot air off the engine's been burning my arm. But I'm going to make it, And by the time I'd made it to Sejuna, I thought, well, let's see if I can get another radiator. Went into a couple of auto shops. No one was really interested in helping me. They could get a radiator shipped in from here and there, and like it was a Friday. The apprentice said he'll do it on a Saturday morning because he needed the money, and it's going to cost me about $1,200. It just got too much to get involved with, because the problem might not have been the radiator. Perhaps it was a blown head gasket. So I thought, you know, let's just put all that trouble aside. Let's just save whatever money I saved from not having to buy a new radiator. Let's just stay at 80 kilometres an hour and just keep going. So I did. I just kept going and going. It was quite windy in the cabin of the van because, of course, I had to have the windows down and the seat up, and the engine was right there, and it was all noisy. I found a piece of cardboard that I could put between me and the engine to stop the heat coming through and to try and cut the noise down. But I just kept driving. I thought, you know, what other time in our lives do we put ourselves in a situation where we're having an adventure? You know, I might be in the middle of nowhere with a broken down van. What am I going to do? All these things are going through my head. The next plan I had was to hotwire the radiator fan because there was a switch for the high beams. I was going to run 2 wires from that switch down and just hotwire the radiator fan so I could manually just have the fan on all the time. Didn't have to do that. It seemed to be going at 80 kilometres an hour. It was fine. It just kept me going until I got there. Just stopped in at Majura Motel. I was stoked because I went to fill up, because I haven't been here. I stopped through there 22 years ago when I was 18. And I was stoked. I stopped and I said to the guy, do you remember me? Oh, he was here for fuel 22 years ago. He said, oh yeah, I remember you. Yeah, so I gave him a $10 tip. It was great. Now I probably should have done a bit more research about the trip, because as I started going west off the highway from South Australia to the Northern Territory, I turned west to go to Ayers Rock. There was this great big rock, and I thought it was Ayers Rock. And I made it, and I was so excited. And I jumped out of the van, I'm whooping around, and look at that, it was great. Well, I've only got one thing to say. Look, I made it! Woo! Hey, I made it! Holy crap, I made it! Look at that! There. Then I stopped for a minute and I thought, well, that doesn't look like Ayers Rock. So I went back and had a look at my map, and I realised that there's another big rock before Ayers Rock. So that blew the wind out of my sails a fair bit. So I got back in the van. I just kept driving and driving and driving. Still being at 80 kilometres an hour in my bunky van. And I got there. When I got there, I had a walk around. Made sure I took the time to see all the places about Ayers Rock. I went and watched the sunset, and I went around to another place and I watched the sun come up. But, one morning I went around, there was a little platform on the west side of Ayers Rock where you can go there and you can watch the sun. I came to the viewing point this morning to watch the sunrise. And who would have thought an hour ago this place was shoulder to shoulder with tourists. And the sunrise was a bit disappointing because it was cloudy. So I thought, I've come this far, I'm just going to get my chair and I'm going to sit and I'm going to watch and I'm going to wait until it looks more interesting. And it is, it's getting much better. So I'm just going to sit for a bit longer and just take in the sight. Got to remember to take time. I spent a week to get there. I had some dramas to get to Ayers Rock, but I got there. And I wanted to make sure that I saw everything I could about this place. So I've just climbed the hill behind my campsite to watch the sunset. And you can just see my van there, just behind that little bush. And I'm sitting here having a bit of wine. Now I lost my glass, so I have to drink it straight out of the bottle. And this is what I'm watching the sunset on. Look at that. Gee, I live a tough life. So after going to Ayers Rock, I decided I'm going to go to Alice Springs. I'm going to dump the van, I'm going to get a plane home. The stress of driving in the van was starting to get to me, so I made it to Alice Springs and drove around, and I found a car yard and I went to spoke to the guy and said, look, I just want to leave the van somewhere and I'm going to get a flight home. He said, he doesn't want it, doesn't have space for it, it's just a liability for him. So I thought, well, okay, fair enough. So went to a travel agent, thought, okay, well, how can I get home? Bus doesn't leave for 2 days, got to go here, got to go there, it's going to take this time, it's going to cost this much, I could take a flight, got to get a connecting flight, it's going to cost so much. And went to another car yard, no one was interested in taking the van off my hands, so I thought, bugger it, let's just take the money I saved in getting a flight home or getting rid of the van, and let's just see if I can use that money, see if I can get the van to get me home again. So I stopped up at a public tap and I filled up all my containers with water and made sure I had plenty of water to keep the radiator topped up, and seat propped up and 80 kilometres an hour, and away I went. Constant trail of cars coming past me. I mean, just driving along at 80. I'm just about 100 k's out of Cooper Pedy. Now I've seen a lot of cool things on my trip so far, but these are one of the coolest things you see on the side of the road. Check this out. Those are the ones that didn't make it, and that could be me. But when you're driving at 80 kilometres an hour, you can see a lot more. It's not focusing on the speed at all. I'd set up a cruise control system. I got a choc milk carton and I crushed it down and I put it underneath the accelerator pedal. So it would only go down so far. I could just keep my foot on there at 80 kilometres an hour, just sit there all day. Coming back, I had a fire. There was ignition fire. I've just had a fire down underneath the steering wheel. Seems to have fizzled out quite quickly. I've just had a look and all I can find is just this wire. It's steaming hot. It must have just shorted out on something. So all the lights I think still seem to be working, so I was going to put this piece of tape over it and keep going. Later on that night I think I'd got to Cooper Pedy, turned the van off just outside a caravan park to collect my thoughts before I went in to find a place I could have a shower and so forth for the night. I had a little fire in the van today, just under the ignition, and it was just a burnt wire. And I've stopped the car and now it won't start. But I found where the wire is. It's one of the wires from the immobiliser, right there. I need to connect it back up to there, and then I can keep going. It's pitch black. There's nothing here. Holy moly. And I just got back in my van and thought, well, seems to be going all right. I got this far. I'll just keep going. A bit further down the road, there's a Aboriginal man standing on the side of the road with a car, had the one wheel off. No, it wasn't off. He had some problem. And I thought, this poor guy, I wonder how many people are just driving past. So I pulled over and said, oh, what do you need? He goes, oh, I need a spanner to undo my wheel nuts. I've got to change my wheel. So I said, oh yeah, I've got one of those, and handed it to him. And he went over and he shouted out something into the bush. And these 4 other guys jumped out of the hiding in the bushes. I thought, oh man, what's going on here? But one guy, they'd pushed a rock under the car, and they didn't have a jack, so they pushed a rock under the car and they dug a big hole under the wheel, and they needed a car jack to get the nuts off the wheel. So they got the wheel changed. I just waited in the van. I'm thinking, are they going to carjack me? What's going on here? And then I thought, well, you know what? I'm in a bunky van. I might be 20 kilometres down the road, and I might need their help. I might need a lift in their car. So I helped them out, and they were nice, and they said thanks, and I gave them a bottle of water because I didn't have anything to drink, and I got in my van and away I went. And 2 minutes down the road, they just come howling past me, driving on past, arms out the window, and yeah, good on you fellas. And I just kept going, and I thought, well, it was a bit scary. I didn't know what was going to happen, but it's always good to stop and help people. So I'm out here in the middle of nowhere. It's a sparse and desolate wasteland. And amongst all of this wasteland, I've got 2 questions. Where do the flies come from? And why did someone have to throw away their cassette? Look at that. That was probably a good cassette. Flies. Holy moly. Where do they come from? I also saw a couple of cars that were crashed. People had obviously got out okay, but the evidence of what happened was left on the road, and I've got a few pictures of those. But, so many things along the way telling me, Matt, you know what, you might not make this. And as I thought about that, it occurred to me that what am I doing about this fear of not making it? And it's the same in our day-to-day lives. We always fear that we're not going to make it. And in my trip to Ayers Rock, it was never a question of not getting there. It was always, what do I have to do to make this van get me there? What's going to be the next step? And you know what? I was fully prepared just to leave the van on the side of the road and hitchhike to get there. But I'm glad that I made the van get me there. Turns out to be a good look at life. To think, how are you going to make your life get you where you want it to go? So I just kept going, and then I made it back to Port Augusta and Ceduna and back across the Nullarbor, and I made it home. It was regular topping up the radiator, and when I got home I thought, that's it, I'm just going to get rid of the van. I'm just posting this short video to let everyone know that I'm safe back home in my room. And you know what? I bloody did it. I'm exhausted, and I'm going to spend the next 3 days in bed. But I did it. But when I got home, I realised that it wasn't a case of me just going to Ayers Rock. There's lots of things involved, but there was this determination in me, not just to drive a van to Ayers Rock, or let the van take me to Ayers Rock. You know what? I made that van get me to Ayers Rock. All the little repair jobs I had to do on the way, that was my determinism to make it to Ayers Rock. I wanted to get there, and I made the van get me there. And now this is sort of, it crosses over into lots of other areas in my life. How many times do we give up on something? You've got to try, and in the same way, I made that van get me to Ayers Rock. I'm going to live my life until my life gives me the things that I need, the things that I need to be healthy, to be financially secure, and to be loved. For many years, I was just a victim of depression, but now I want to use what I've learned about myself and my depression to fire me up and to make sure I get what I want out of life.